When the game gets rough and this life just seems so tough, make we talk, my people, make we talk. When this town becomes an ugly place, don't let it erase the smile from your face. Make we talk, people, make we talk. Conversation is the key, a guiding light for you and me. Spark a talk and you will see. Conflict solver A to Z. World leaders master the art of self-defense just by talk. So people, make we talk. Hey, we're living in a world that on ourselves we must depend. Make we talk, people.
Good evening or good afternoon, wherever you're listening and watching. Good night from around the world and the Eastern Caribbean. I must apologize to my viewers who were on earlier on. We have our esteemed guests with us this evening, Mr. Don Anderson. He is the one who did the recent poll for the People's National Party. Mr. Anderson is on, and also Dr. Rupert Francis, head of the Jamaican Diaspora Crime Prevention Task Force. We're going to have Luke George Cooke on with us pretty soon. He is a human rights activist. Mr. Anderson, good evening to you, sir. Welcome to Make We Talk.
Good evening. Good evening to all your viewers. I'm glad to be on your program. So I hope I can share some good information with you and have a good rapport with you all this evening. I expect it will be.
Yes, it will be, sir. It will be with Dr. Francis and everything. It will be. And Dr. Francis?
Yeah, that is true. You know, it reminds me so much of Dr. Oh my God, he's gonna kill me now. But he's a good friend of ours. You look like Cooke, Don. You know what ever tell you that. Mark, you're better looking at him, but that's another matter.
I was about to make that point, right? Yeah, I know him very well, man.
Yes, I know.
He's been on a number of teams.
You don't remember? Yes, you don't remember me in the old days, but I was in the military, Park Camp.
Okay.
And then, I went the green screen. Yes. Watch it. I was a green man once upon a time.
Yeah. I was wondering if it did that. Deliberately.
Actually, it's not supposed to show at all. But I'm not a technocrat. But the bottom line is I'm very happy to be in the audience, to be in the spot where I am tonight. And I'm in the diaspora, and I have run the crime task for several years. And the fact of the matter is that I do believe that had the current government listened, not to be heady or anything.
Hold on for me, Dr. Francis. Hold on. Before we get into that, we have to welcome Luke George. And we're going to start off this evening. We're going to start off with Mr. Anderson. Sir Anderson, a lot of Jamaicans, overseas, who are not really abreast of the whole polls and everything. For me, personally, and I hope I'm not asking a stupid question, how do you go about doing the polls?
Okay. That I think is always a very good question to ask, and it's something that I'm always anxious to explain, because it's very important that we get the context right. So, apart from everybody knowing this was done for the People's National Party, they commissioned me, whether it's the People's National Party, TVJ, RJR, JLP, Rupert Francis, whoever, it doesn't matter. The author doesn't matter, because one thing is constant. We do use the same procedures, whoever is the sponsor of the program. So we interviewed 1,012 persons in the recently concluded poll. It's a nationally representative sample of persons 18 years and over, and it's broken down by different age groups. And why nationally representative is because each of the segments, the demographic segments that are within that sample, reflect the overall population, the makeup of the overall population, which is what allows us to, from that 1,012 persons, as was the case here, to project the data upwards, because that 1012 is a kind of mirror of the population in terms of its makeup. So we interview people face to face, and we use a structured questionnaire. No interviewer is allowed to change the questions. So we approach it in that way. And once the interviews are uploaded to our system in Kingston, we do a validation procedure which makes sure that we sanitize the data, meaning there are no bogus questionnaires and questionnaires that are not complete. And that's very generally how we do the survey. All the analysis is kept inside our house, and everything is absolutely confidential until released to the client.
Okay. I see where you have in one of the polls. Before I do that, Luke and Dr. Francis, you have anything to ask Mr. Anderson? Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jeffrey.
No, I've always been fascinated by the polls, to be quite honest with you, and the level of accuracy. I sometimes I had to say in the past, no, Don, you can't be right about that. Honestly, I'm telling you. But then you prove me wrong, and I like that, because I'm one of those people who believe that statistics, how one can play with statistics. But from what, and I'm saying this because you're on here with me. I'm saying this because I'm polls and you have done polls, and I'm telling you, sometimes I cannot believe the outcomes myself. But I would encourage people. I would encourage people to take interest in what is happening, and to see and to evaluate the polls for what they are, and not jump to a conclusion that I used to myself jump to. Right? No, I read the polls, but who does them? To me, that's what I'm saying. I think it's important and indicate where the people want to go. I've been talking a long time.
Yes. Mr. Anderson, I see where you have the top 5 biggest challenges facing Jamaicans. Unemployment among youths, 3%. Right. Corruption, 6%. Unemployment, 16%. High cost of living, 16%. And the biggest in all of it, the crime and violence in Jamaica stand at 45%.
Correct.
Can you explain more about that to us, sir?
Well, it's nothing really to explain. It's just to tell you that when we asked persons spontaneously, we didn't prompt anybody with any possible answers. In other words, we will call it a totally open-ended question. So we capture the verbatim comments from people, right? So when we simply asked, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing Jamaica right at this point in time? You will notice that those add up to more than 100%. And it's simply because some person gave more than one answer. But when we tabulated all of the information, the most important factor was those 40% who said crime and violence is the biggest challenge. And it stood out like a sore thumb above all the others. So we had probably about 14 different answers, but those ranked in the top 6 of the problems. And the most important, most significant was crime and violence. So it's a big impact on how Jamaicans see a lot of things.
Okay. Luke, George?
No, but there is something else that Don could also speak to, as it relates to poll. There in another forum, I saw Don did a presentation where more people voted in the 1976 election, I think, Mr. Anderson, than in the last election. And it's interesting that when you look at it, you look how people used to vote in block. And I think there was a 150, if I'm quoting from memory correctly, because I couldn't ask the gentleman for his slide. There was 150 people who used to constantly vote for the People's National Party, who in the last 2 elections, you noticed that was a drop. That block of people are not voting anymore. But consistently, I think he made a comparison to a 480 people voted for the Jamaica Labour Party. That could help you to understand that construction of that 37.9% of persons who voted in the last election. But in reality, it shows a consistency in that number as to what people are saying. corruption that they see in both political party, the lack of job creation that gives people more equity to stand on their feet and not be dependent on social program, crime and violence that we don't seem to have a handle on, yet still we have the national task force in the diaspora headed up by Rupert Francis and other esteemed persons with skill set in law enforcement. And I remember hearing an excerpt where the Minister of National Security said, "Oh, yeah, the people in the brown suit in Jamaica are super qualified. Just send us the resources; they can handle it." If that is true, we are 50 odd years old, going. We're
60.
actually what 60, 60, and we have been hearing that we will be able to bring down crime. So the fact of the matter that Mr. Anderson can also tell you that young people are frustrated with both political party. They feel that they have betrayed the trust. As I said, they have not worked to help us to fulfill our dreams and aspiration. And so people are just frustrated. And that frustration leads to them taking $3,000 and $5,000, because that is the only time they feel that they are being paid for the effort and the blood, sweat, and tears that they have sacrificed. And so they take it out, and most of the time they tell you, we will eat them out, but we will also vote them out. And in the next election, we have to encourage people to see that election have serious consequences. So you can't just not eat them up. But what you need to do is to make sure that you hold the fire to the feet of your MPs and to whoever form the next administration to work on the things that I consider to be important to me as a Jamaican, because I can't talk about me as an individual. I'd like to see better healthcare. I'd like to see a reduction in crime and violence where people feel that they can invest in the country again.
But,
I would
but
like to see an improvement in education. Yes, yes, Jeffrey.
no, what I'm saying, you said something a while ago that has me, you know, wanting to hear Mr. Anderson comment on that. In the 1972 election, you said?
19, I think, no man, we got independence in in in
In
um
62.
in 62. But yeah,
62.
somewhere around. Yeah,
All right,
but he can tell you the year.
let me see if I can articulate it. What Luke was making mention of just now is the historical voting pattern, not only which particular party they voted for, but how many people turned out to vote. And I did a presentation to the Electoral Office of Jamaica some time ago, in which I plotted the voting pattern from 1962 through to 2020. And there's a very significant line chart which says that today, when the population or the voting population, the number of persons registered, is significantly more than it was in 1962. The number of persons voting now is only marginally more than voted in 1962. And therefore, what this says is that there's a significant turnoff, whether you want to call it voter apathy, you want to call it voter rejection, whatever. The fact of the matter is that number of persons who voted in the 2020 election was 37%, whereas we reached a peak of voting somewhere in the region of 1980 when we had over 80% turning out to vote. So that what is happening now is that there's a significant turnoff in terms of both political parties and the voting process, because and we do have a lot of information on that. People are really not happy with either the political parties, politicians in general, politics, corruption, the factors that are driving unemployment, and so on. And so right now, the number of persons voting is significantly less in percentage terms and actual terms than voted in, say, the 1980 election, and is hardly more than voted in 1962, which is a very significant point to note.
I just
Mm.
here, Mr. We are talking
Mhm.
about the vote position.
Right.
But what I'm is that the people of Jamaica seems to vote in one block, and in another block they're not voting and they're controlling. The educated, where the people who have means, that sort of thing and so on. It seems to me that the general vote that Jamaican does not feel. You're talking about how many? 55% or 60 does not vote, approximately.
Right.
Our people understand why it's
Right.
important to examine. The question is also another question: are the people called above crossroads versus what's the differential? Why is it this apathy on even that?
Well, voter apathy is not peculiar to a demographic group. We find that right across the demographic, whether it's an upper income or middle income or low income persons, we find that voter apathy is strong. People are not turning out to vote, and that's because there's a general dislike of the political process. There is a concern that the political parties haven't really fulfilled the many promises that have been made over the years, and people are just not seeing a viable alternative to either of the two parties because no third party has done very well in Jamaica at all ever, and so there is just this kind of disconnect with the political process, and it runs across the demographic, it runs across age groups. But I must say that when you look at the age profile, the age cohorts, that the persons who are least connected to the political process, unfortunately, are the younger people. And therefore, as the population ages, you're going to find that there is a drop off unless the pattern changes. But right now, we have found that the 18 to 34-year-old cohort are the ones that are least interested in voting, least interested in voting. And as a result, we can see one of the reasons why the overall voter turnout has been lower and lower and lower as people at the top end of the age spectrum fall off. Young persons are not coming on board in sufficiently large numbers to accommodate and take up that slack. So we're finding a general disaffection with the political process.
But
Is it
therefore,
that the
Mr.
youngest of Jamaicans are upset? Why, Dr. Francis?
I just want to there's a correlation because in this cohort that here to the vote, that's basically where the crime and the violence and the anger see from based on what we have seen, the statistics we have seen, and so on. I mean, would you speak to?
Well, the fact of the matter is that the younger folk are the ones that are more disillusioned with the process because, as you see, there is a factor of unemployment amongst young persons. This might be a pretty low percentage relative to the other reasons, but relative to the other factors that they consider to be the critical challenges. But when we ask people amongst the young person, what are your biggest challenges? Unemployment is a big one. And therefore, if you want to draw or try to draw a correlation, it is that those persons are the ones that are more likely to take up the guns because this is an easy opportunity to make some money. So that's the correlation that you probably want to try to draw. The younger persons are not finding going through the established channels as the way to make a living for themselves. And they have significant opportunities now because corruption is so rife to fall into a situation where they can make some quick money. You see, so voting for a particular party is of no real issue. It is said that a few years back, maybe 30 years ago, that the politicians were the ones that called the tune. A lot of people are now saying the politicians are, in fact, no longer in a position to call the tune because there are so many other persons who are role models for younger people. And
you mean the dons of all dons, Mr. Anderson?
Well, I don't know where the dons of the dons, but for certainly that there's a quick return, instant gratification in a process that they are being attracted to. Whereas in the past, people felt that they needed a politician. Now, a lot of the people who are now venturing into illegal activities don't feel they need the politicians anymore, and by extension, don't feel the need to buy into the political process.
Good point.
So, Lou?
Good point.
Look, one of your panelists says that Master Mark is unelectable. Mark Golding is not the PMP. People elect people that they feel very comfortable with. And remember that there are actually 62 seats. And so Mark Golding is going to win in his constituency of South St. Andrew. And as I said to you, that one of the things that Mark Golding have about him that um, people might not agree with him, or people might not see him as charismatic, but one of the things that you can't disagree with is that Mark Gordon is likable. And in Jamaica, is when people like you, it goes a far way for you. So me not go even argue with nobody about Mark Golding winning the election. Again, if Mark Golding can give the reassurance to those disillusioned groups like young people that he is going to actually come up with a job plan that is going to take into account that people at different levels can be gainfully employed. If he can push a policy to reform the police force and make it more um, likable to the Jamaican people and to bring down crime, if he can look at healthcare and reform the healthcare system, reform the education system from early childhood down, and drive those social programs that are going to help the disability groups and so forth, then he's a contender. People talk about Andrew. What Andrew did was to get into the psyche of young people by using something called McClarks. And so Mark Golding has to now reinvent himself, because one of the things that you learn about campaigns and candidate is that it is really the management team that can really make you shine like a silver dollar. So
Make a point, and then let me ask Mr. Anderson something here, because I'm looking on the most Jamaicans are saying the Jamaica Labour Party is leading Jamaica in the wrong direction.
right. So making the point is that, look, elections have consequences, and the mere fact that this poll is now in is projecting that the PMP is becoming attractive, it means that they have some things to do. The Jamaica Labour Party got together and them said they're united, and despite that there are rifts in the party, that as we know that there are rifts, there are different camps. There's the Bobby Montague camp, there's Manayard camp, but when them come out and present a united front, if the PMP can do likewise, and not just fake it, but actually come out as a united front, recognizing that it's not about everybody who wants to become leader, but it's about the people of Jamaica and putting their hopes and dreams ahead of the political gains and leadership that they're vying for, then they will become a viable party. And as Dan says, no third party, because one of the mistakes that third party make in this country is that you should try to at least win one seat to create the mindset that it is possible that a group, you can't contest the whole 60 seat. You will not have the money, and you're not going to have the time to convince people that you can make a change. But if a third party could at least try to win one seat, it makes a difference. And we saw that in one of the elections where an independent candidate ran as councillor and won, Mr. Patmore or whatever his name is, by just bringing water into a community. The Jamaican people, again, is hoping that whoever form the next government will not pay them platitude, but will actually work so that they can benefit. So me don't know who is unelectable in Jamaica now, because if this is the best of what we get in the Jamaica Labour Party, then anybody can run. It's a Donald Trump sort of slate of candidate.
Before, let me ask Mr. Anderson. Hold on, Dr. Francis, please. Let me ask Mr. Anderson this, and he can elaborate on this. The most Jamaicans are saying that the Jamaica Labour Party is leading Jamaica in the wrong direction. Right direction is 15%. Wrong direction is 53.3%. No change is 31.1%. Mr. Anderson, can you elaborate more on that for us?
All right. It's very important to look at the numbers and to really decipher what they're saying. Now, let me tell you that I do a lot of political polling throughout the Caribbean, maybe 8 or 9 Caribbean countries. So I want to name them now. And I don't think that I've done any poll at any point in time where the majority of people in that particular country say the country is going in the right direction. Now, it's a very easy explanation for that. When you look at, let us just use the 2020 election as an example. 37.8% of the people voted, which means 62% of the people didn't vote for some reason or another. Mm-hmm. And then when you break that 37% of the persons who voted, maybe, 60% voted for the JLP and 40% voted for the PNP. When you break that down, that really means that the Jamaica Labour Party is has with about 20% support within the population, the government with 43 seats or thereabout, or 49 seats. See the point I'm making? So the government was elected by about 20% of the people. So when you then ask the entire national population, what do you think about the country with direction? And that 70-80% who did not vote for the Jamaica Labour Party are within or take care of that 53% who said the country is not going in the right direction, because those are PNP supporters and people who didn't vote because they're disenchanted. So it's not a huge number. It's a huge number, but it's an understandable number, because 80% of the persons did not vote for that government, which is now running the country. All right. Mm-hmm. Now, in a different year, maybe the numbers are a little higher. Maybe the support would have been 30% for the government. But we have never had a government in which 50% of the people voted for it. And this is the same thing throughout the Caribbean. You find that less than 50% in every situation vote for the government that's in office. And therefore, it's understandable when you ask a question like that, you get a pretty high incidence of persons who say country going in the wrong direction. If they thought it was going in the right direction, more people would vote, and more people would vote for the government that's in office.
Let me ask you this before I have our other guest comes in.
Right.
In June of 2022,
right,
PNP 18%, JLP 34%. In February of 2023, PNP 28.1%, Jamaica Labour Party 27.9%. In June of 2023, the People's National Party gained some traction of 30.2%, and the Labour Party at 25%. Right. Is it that this poll is saying, Mr. Anderson, that the Prime Minister should call election right now, the People's National Party would win?
No. I mean, political polls don't determine who wins an election, Elections are won on election day. The political polls represent a snapshot at a point in time. Now, the only way in which you can predict accurately how an election may go is if you have a trend of data which is all going in the same direction, like in 2007 election, for example, where at the start of the year, the People's National Party was 9 percentage points ahead of the Jamaica Labour Party. By the time the election was held in September, those lines just narrowed to the point where the JLP was 1 percentage point ahead of the People's National Party when the election was called. So the trend was consistently for a falling percentage for the People's National Party and a growing percentage for the Jamaica Labour Party. Mr. Jarrett would probably be interested to hear this. So that when we call that election in 2007, despite the fact that the People's National Party was the government and led right through the line, the fact that the lines were narrow and consistent to the election, I was able to call the election for the Jamaica Labour Party. I said the day before the election that the Jamaica Labour Party would win 32 seats and the People's National Party 28. That's exactly how it took place. Yes. 32-28 was the outcome. All right. So much for Mr. Jarrett, who doesn't seem to really want to learn anything. There's a Mr. Jarrett who is commenting, and I'm reading his comments.
Yes, but, that's all right. Yes, that's all right.
Yeah. That I like to educate. I like to educate.
Don't follow Mr. Don't follow Mr. Jarrett. Don't follow Mr. Jarrett. Mr. Jarrett is
important to educate.
It is important to educate people who.
All right. So let me answer the question that my host asked.
Jeffrey Tavares. Remember, just say Jeffrey.
Huh?
Just say Jeffrey.
Jeffrey. Okay.
Yes.
The question was, how do we explain that pattern, and would it mean that if the Mr. Andrew Holden has called the election now that the People's National Party would win. And I said, no, elections are won on election day. And the poll that we did in July last year, February this year, and June this year are all a picture at a point in time. Okay. Now, in July last year, when we did the poll, People's National Party was 18 percentage points and the Jamaica Labour Party 31 percentage points. So that was a 13 percentage point lead. And I don't think I heard anybody in the Jamaica Labour Party side saying something was wrong with it. They were very happy to have those numbers.
Yes, indeed.
Very happy. And it's the largest gap that I can recall my reporting and in the poll that I've done in 10 or 15 years. All right. Yeah. But it reflected a situation where, having lost that election in 2020 badly, 49-14, the support for the People's National Party fell away. Disenchantment, quarrels, fuss, everything that was negative. So by the time we did that poll in July last year, they were adrift by 13 percentage points. And that represented, by the way, an increase from the 2021 situation, because they were about 8 percentage points behind then. So they fell away even further. By the time we did the poll in February of 2023, this year, a number of events had taken place, such as, the salary challenges, they quarreled with the taxi situation, the road thing, salary negotiations, police, everybody. There are lots of things that were taking place. Plus, the fallout in the public, in the financial sector, where Usain Bolt and several other people lost their money, and it was felt that the government didn't handle it very well, or the whole thing with the Financial Services Commission. So lots of things took place. When we did the poll in February, the People's National Party clawed their way up to 28.1%, and the Jamaica Labour Party fell off from that 31% last year to 27.9%. Nothing alarming. Nothing alarming. It is said, it is simply that there was a significant degree of disaffection, and I think Luke made reference to the 160,000 persons that fell off away from the People's National Party between 2011 and 2020. They lost 160,000 voters. The GLP only lost 4,000. So what we found by the time we did the February poll, it seems as if some of the People's National Party who had not voted were beginning to come back. And you put more meat in one side of the scale, it tends to tilt the balance. So by then the People's National Party had sneaked ahead by 0.2 of a percentage point. Since then, a number of other things have happened, such as the government granting new salary increases to all the members of parliament, which a significant percentage of the population felt was just absolutely outrageous. So when we went into the field in June, that would have also played a part, in addition to all the other negatives, played a part and moved the People's National Party 5 percentage points ahead. It doesn't mean that if they called an election now, that the People's National Party would win. Because I believe if the JLP was convinced of that, then clearly they would want to hold out as long as possible. Whereas, again, I believe that this is a snapshot. It is a snapshot, and therefore one would need to see when we do it again, maybe next month, maybe 2 months' time, what is that trend? If that trend now says the People's National Party has moved ahead to 8 percentage points, that would be worrying. Because that would be really worrying. So say, do I call the election before it gets any worse?
Yes.
Or do I wait until I can find a mechanism by which I can win back the favor of the people? So the poll results don't condition when people have the elections. It doesn't. But it does.
Go ahead, Dr. Francis.
Is influence of propaganda, the influence of smoke screen, the influence of red herrings, the influence of people like these people come in and trolls, they put the work and so on and so forth. How effective is that to feel to the of Jamaica at a time which is crucial? Make it quite clear. There are some people with the irrelevance of the diaspora. And not because I'm in the diaspora, I do my investment in Jamaica anyway.
Right.
And that's gonna stop. Honestly, but the point I'm trying to make is this: that why is this? Is someone feeding these people with these disaffections so that they can have someone else to blame for the issues, or what is it? Because I'm saying you're the pollster, you go out there, you have to act a certain way. But at the same time, at my standpoint, where I'm listening to it, and I see it happening all, I say, oh wow, look at this move. You know what I mean? Are people doing that or evaluating like that?
Well, if you're talking about the sorts of noise that you hear in the environment when a poll result comes out, it's understandably, and I hope I'm answering your question. And, a lot of people have said to me time and time again, boy, somebody on the radio saying awful things about your poll, aren't you going to rebut that, etc., etc.? And I draw reference to something the Honorable Edward Thiago, God bless him, who actually was the one who got me into political polling when he was Prime Minister, by the way.
I heard you. I heard you gave what should I say now? A preview of that he was the one who led you into polling.
Yes, Mr. Thiago was the one who invited me. First of all, I did some work for him while he was Prime Minister, Bustamante Institute, and then he seemed to have been impressed with the data, so he then asked me to do some polls for the party. Okay, but the point I'm making is that he was one of my severest public critics. When the poll came out, that didn't have him ahead. And during that period, of course, when he was in opposition, when PJ Patterson was Prime Minister, they were on a run in which they weren't going to win any election. That's the Jamaica Labour Party. And he was severely critical. But you know what? When he was finished vilifying me in the media, my telephone at home would ring, and Mr. Thiago would say to me, Don, you have any more information you can share with me? All right. So I learned that's serious. I learned not to be overly concerned. I don't ignore, but I'm not overly concerned about the kind of attempts to discredit the polls and so on, because I've been in the polling business for over 30 years. I've been in the market research business for 52 years. And the political polling business is a very small percentage of my overall business. So when you're working for the World Bank and you're working for financial institutions across the country and in other countries, when you're working for major corporate sponsors in Jamaica and elsewhere, and so on, you will nobody worth its salt would ever be foolish enough to distort a political poll for any party whatsoever at any time ever. And all the parties know that. In 2016 election, I did an equal amount of polling for the Jamaica Labour Party as I did for the People's National Party. And in essence, I take one principle into what I do. As a professional who has a massive market research business, not just a political business, a massive market research business, I don't really care who wins. I can't. As a professional, I can't. And therefore, I walked into the toughest boardrooms in the country and given the worst news. I walked into the Ministry of National Security, having done a survey for them. Obviously, they paid for it, and gave them the worst possible news about how the police force was perceived. It's what you find, unfortunately. So I've grown thick-skinned enough to just do a good job at what I'm doing and leave the data to speak for itself. But to answer your question, and the other question that was asked, well, polls polls give you a reflection of how the public is viewing the parties. But on election day, when the machinery begins to work, it's the party that gets out the supporters most of all. And nowadays, it's the party that has more money, because elections have become very transactional.
I am happy you touched on that, Mr. Anderson, because I was saying to some friends of mine today, some Jamaicans in the diaspora were saying to them that, you know what? If election called tomorrow morning, the Labour Party is going to win because they have enough money.
Well, the party with the money will definitely stand a better chance of winning. There's no question about it. But again, it depends on the level of disaffection which has taken place, because we can't quantify it, because we don't have, people aren't prepared to admit it. But in recent elections, people have taken money to vote and either not voted or not done what they were expected to do. So all of these are factors that are at work too. But generally, the party that has the financial resources at its disposal would stand a better chance, all things being equal.
Before I let Dr. Francis and my good friend Luke George come in, let me ask you this question, Mr. Anderson.
Right.
Have you ever done a poll on the local government election, how Jamaicans feel of the election that being called?
Not specifically, but in the work that we have done, it is clear that the people are very disenchanted, very disappointed that no local government elections have been held. And you know what? It also feeds into the narrative that the government doesn't want to call that election because they feel it might reflect a negative for them. And that would not be good going into a general election. All right. So there's that narrative which is being why aren't they calling the election? And the thinking is that, boy, they're not sure they can win, and they wouldn't want to call a local election close to a general election. And that local government election shows that they are not the favored party to win.
Dr. Francis?
You know, my question is the diaspora. I have to go back there because and its relationship with Jamaica and so on. I would love to. I know based on the crime situation, but I'm not dealing with that. I'm dealing with the relationship. That have you ever in your polling gotten a sense of whether the Jamaican people feel that the diaspora is an advantage to them or a support for them, or do you feel that they are disenchanted with the diaspora, as some people have us believe? That's just a general question.
I don't think that there is any significant level of disenchantment, and I'm going to refer to another survey that we do, and it's called the Business and Consumer Confidence Survey, very much like confidence surveys that are done in the United States and elsewhere. All right. This is a survey that we've been doing for the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce for the last 22 years consistently. It's a survey, the results of which goes to Parliament, to Cabinet, and they follow it very closely because it talks to them in terms of the level of confidence that businesses and consumers have in the economy. Now, we found that in up to 2010, we couldn't understand some of the buying intentions of the general public or even some of the business sector until we decided, I wonder if the remittances played an important role in all of this. And we plugged questions in on that particular questionnaire that talked to you in terms of how many people are receiving remittances from overseas, etc. And what we found was absolutely revealing that remittances were playing a significant role coming from the United States primarily, UK, Canada, but significantly from the United States, a significant role in helping people to actually deal with their daily household expenditure and daily living. So that I know that there is a significant connection and positive associated with the diaspora. No question about that. And primarily it is because the diaspora, and particularly the people in the USA, are very significant contributors to the livelihood of the Jamaican people here, not just in the low income, because we're finding that when we break it down and we ask them, we are looking at people who are marginalized and in the low, middle, and low income, but also persons in the middle income who are receiving remittances. So remittances play a vital role in the Jamaican economy. And from that perspective, I believe the diaspora is highly respected, if even because they are a money tree, so quote unquote. Only for that reason. But I know it's more than just that. But I haven't done a specific question, but I know that the Jamaican public, in all the surveys that we have done, and I say we have done this Business and Consumer Confidence Survey for the last 22 continuous years. And it's the PNP government, the JLP government, they're anxious when that data is about to be released. They grab it, it goes to cabinet, and many ministers have told me, boy, Don, this was the subject of discussion at cabinet meeting today. PNP, JLP, no matter.
One quick one on that.
Mr. Anderson.
No. Oh, sorry. Right.
Yes.
No, the reason.
Go ahead, Doctor.
just want to ask this one question.
Sure. You're breaking up a bit.
Dr. Francis, you're breaking up. Dr. Francis, repeat your question.
I'm just saying the influence of media obviously has been impactful. Social media has been impactful on what is happening in Jamaica. Do you see this going forward as a factor in the determination in the elections going forward or not?
Absolutely so. I mean, there was a point in time when things have evolved. In the early 2000s, when we didn't have the presence of social media to the extent that we currently do, our questions, the classification section was about occupation, age, gender, and so on. More and more and more in the last 10 years, and it will become even more important. We're talking about, well, with social media, are you watching, listening to what, are you following? Social media has become extremely important in the political process because you reach a lot of the younger generation on social media, obviously, and as a result, you find that it is becoming more and more a vehicle through which people are communicating messages about their parties and what they're doing. And I don't see this turning back right now. I see it, in fact, increasing. And a lot of the parties are using social media. The problem with social media use, is that it is probably more youth related than anything else. But as I've indicated earlier, the young people are the ones who are not necessarily the